So, as panelists, I would like to invite Professor C. Malla Reddy from IIT Hyderabad, from Royal Society of Chemistry. I would like to invite you on stage, sir. Next is Professor Sara E. Skrabalak from Indiana University, USA, from American Chemical Society. Professor Carsten Sievers from Georgia Institute of Technology, USA, from Elsevier. From SEL Press, we have Dr. Shreya Sarkar and Dr. Rohit Bhatia from Thieme. As moderators for this session, we have Dr. Aayushi Arora from RSC, India, and our very own Ms. Gunjan Sharma, representing the voices of students from TIFR Mumbai. Dr. Rohit will join us shortly, and till then, over to you, Gunjan and Aayushi.
So a very good morning to everyone. On behalf of the organizing committee and Royal Society of Chemistry, we welcome you all to the third panel discussion, which is on the editor's insights for navigating the publishing landscape. And while we are waiting for Dr. Rohit, I would just like to take 2 minutes of yours to just highlight 2 to 3 key points on Royal Society of Chemistry. Though I know it is not subjected to any introduction, but Royal Society of Chemistry has been here since 1841, serving the chemical sciences community. And we have a network of more than 60,000 members worldwide. So aligning with the theme of our conference, which is energy and environmental science, I want to take this opportunity to introduce our 2 major journals which have been expanded from EES family this year, which is EES Solar and EES Batteries, for submitting high impactful work on solar energy and battery related research. And we have our membership colleague here, Dr. Rajdeep Roy. So if you are looking for any grant related to travel or any sustainable laboratories grant for your organizing a meeting or research, please grab a hold of him and be a member of Royal Society of Chemistry to explore all these grants. So now bringing the discussion back to our editorial session, I know as a PhD scholar, I had too many queries on what is the publishing landscape look like? What does happen with my manuscripts? So with that, I think if I would have attended one of these sessions, it would have been really beneficial for me. So we have Professor Thieme Reddy from Royal Society of Chemistry, Professor Sara from ACS, and Professor Sievers from Elsevier, Dr. Shreya from SEL Press, and we're still waiting for Dr. Batra to come and join us on stage. So I would now hand over the mic to Dr. Malla Reddy for a few opening remarks.
Am I audible? Okay. Very good morning, everyone. And first of all, let me thank Vivek and all the team for inviting and also giving all of us this opportunity to speak on the publishing. I think there are a lot of things that one need to know on how, if you want to really understand how the publishing goes, there are a lot of things that happen behind the scenes in the editorial office before the articles come to the editors, and I think this is dealt in a different way by different publishers. From the scientific community point of view, if you look at actually the publication acceptance rate or on how it is actually treated, it will depend on how nicely you basically package your work and how nicely you identify the gap areas and then how nicely you articulate it. And initially, the editor normally takes a bird view, and associate editor does not normally have so much time to go into details. So it is on how you basically pitch in the cover letter and maybe in the abstract, and then figures how nicely you thoroughly make it. So that is what I think is the first thing that one should take care of. But I think I request since we have only 45 minutes, I don't want to take too much time. I think it would be also good to take questions from others. So I hand over to Sara.
Hi, Sara Skrabalak. As I already have presented or introduced my journals to you earlier in the week, but I guess I would just comment that publishing your results is critically important, because if you don't publish your results, it's as if they haven't happened. And being able to share your results helps people build on your new knowledge that you have generated and move the scientific enterprise forward. It also helps us to validate that different results are reproducible and something that can be used in the future. And so I look forward to addressing questions on how you can get your work published.
Good morning. I'm Carsten Sievers from Georgia Tech, and here representing my work as Deputy Editor-in-Chief of Applied Catalysis A General. So I want to elaborate a little bit on comments that were kind of made in the same direction by my colleagues. But to me, the most important thing in a publication is that it adds novel understanding. And that is often overlooked. It's not necessarily a new material that is slightly different than a previous one. It's not the couple percentage point increment in performance. We want to understand how nature works and why. On a more personal note, or more directed to the journal that I'm representing, we have the name applied in the term. And we heard several talks on this conference already on how important it is for science to not just be scientifically rigorous, but also to solve the pressing environmental problems that these worlds are facing. And so as a journal that has this in the name, we are very much driving this message, and we're looking for contributed content in forms of perspectives that also survey the field of catalysis with this application orientation, and hopefully make a contribution to get our skills and energy and financial resources more directed to help society.
Good morning. This is Shreya from SEL Press, and I represent Joule majorly. And firstly, thanks to Professor Polshettiwar for giving us this opportunity. So even though I'm associated with Joule, there are other SEL Press journals specified for different topics, but predominantly for Joule, I would say that, I agree with what the other panel members say, that yes, for publishing, novelty is a thing that we look into, but it's not only about the novelty, but it is also related to the application as well as the real-time applicability of the work. And also it depends on how the work has been structured or framed when we get the paper submissions. So looking forward to more discussions and questions from your side to understand that how we evaluate manuscript handling at Joule and related things about publications. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you, Vivek, for giving me opportunity here. Myself, Rohit. I'm representing Thieme Publishing Group. So I agree with all the panelists. But as far as a novelty is concerned, in our group, that is a forte of the academic editors. As a editorial office, we normally look on the structure of the manuscript and also how good it is written or what is the storytelling is. Most of the time we got a scripts which are not having a storytelling around the good results. So if you are not able to express what you are doing perfectly packaged, as was saying, if the package is not completed, then it's a very high chances that people are not going to review it also. So there is a one major problem as a editors we find is finding the reviewers, because sometimes manuscript which come where they are not a full or complete storytelling kind of thing, it's not telling them. So a reviewers has to put a more effort, and these days people are very busy, so they just want a packaged manuscript complete. So I'm here only to address more questions on this topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Batra, and everyone else for your insightful thoughts. So, very well points laid out that about the words I view from the editors and the research. Unpublished is actually research undone. To the packaging your manuscript in a very nice and a very subtle manner so that we can take a quick decision on for the manuscript. So with that, we move on. And so the first question that we would like to ask you is like, what are the major factors that we should consider while we are submitting a manuscript to a high impact factor journal? And for that, maybe we'll start with Professor Malla Reddy again.
Yeah. So, see, I think as you said, story, sometime you will not be able to put up very nicely, mainly because you do not know, you have probably not identified the gap areas properly. And then once you identify the gap areas, then you know what is the context of your story. So if you find the context of your story properly, I think you will be able to narrate. See, eventually the publication is for consumption of the readers. So it has to be aligned with some context, and then the story should come. Okay, then it becomes very easy for people to, connect with. So that is the first part. So you will not be able to find the context properly sometime because you have not read the literature enough. If you read the literature enough, and if you have knowledge only in a very narrow area, sometime you may not be able to find the right context. So it is very important that you do a thorough literature search, and then you will be able to find the context. And then you should not have too many stories in the paper. You should have one major line of story. You can have plugins, it works fine, but you have to put it in the right context. Then I think you have a nice story. Then you will also be able to think of the figures. You can structure it properly. So then other important aspect is you have to invest your time. If you want to particularly go for a very high impact journal, the research has to be also to the last detail. So that is very important. If you do not go to the last detail, and also if, for example, if you are thinking of something like at a Science, Nature, or it's a bigger journals like JACS, Chemical Science, and Angewandte Chemie, at that level, even bigger level, If you go beyond the subject journals, I think it should be very much appealing to the common people. The way you write also should be like more like between the popular article and scientific article, with minimal technical details, but it has to be very nicely packaged. So then anybody should be able to understand it. That is, I think, very important if you are really targeting at that level. But at the community top level journals, you have to go to all the details and you have to package very nicely, and figures, formatting, everything should be properly taken care. Then when somebody reads, if you find like a lot of spelling mistakes in the abstract cover letter, it gives a very bad impression. It is clear that you have not put enough effort. One by one, things will keep adding up in the mind of, because eventually it has to be a good article and everybody should be able to understand it. So I think with this, I give the.
So as a follow-up question, from a student perspective,
Yeah.
you touched briefly upon the importance of cover letters. So did Dr. Bhatia. So I was curious how much time and how important are the cover letters and what points should one keep in mind while framing those?
So cover letters are very important. So most of the times when I in editorial office see cover letters, 80% of cover letters are run of the mill cover letters. They are very generic. There is like a very standard template. No, cover letter, you can justify why you want to this manuscript in high impact factor. This is the first interaction. Like as a why high impact factor journals normally get a lot of submissions also. Okay. So if as a editorial office, the first point, like it's going to academic editor is a secondary thing. The first point, if you can justify me, this is a good article to justify time spent by academic editor, looking, reading and finding reviewer for it, it is a high chance that it will pass through the editorial office. A lot of people say that our article desk rejected. Yeah. So most of the time it is desk rejected because first impression is cover letter. So you are just saying that this is my manuscript, we have done this, and we think it is justified to be in this. No, you have to give proper justification also. You have to make your argument in the letter. So if you make a very good argument in your letter, like spending a day framing a letter, like you spent like 2 months in a manuscript, one day on a good letter would be good enough to justify that this should be a work for which you are working for a 6 months to year, and then it is justified to be coming in this journal. So that is important.
Yeah. I would like to add something. We talked a lot about packaging and about how to sell your work, but I would encourage you to not just start thinking about this when it's time to submit the manuscript, or even when it's time to write the manuscript. This is a thought that should start the moment that you have the first advisee discussion about what direction to take. It's important to package it well, but we also need to have a good story. And you write good stories by identifying meaningful questions that haven't been asked and answered in quite the same way as your work could. Now, the beauty about academic research is that I have the right to rephrase the question if my results turn out to be unexpected and my story changes along the way. That's all fine. But you will increase the likelihood that you have the story that is worth packaging and submitting and promoting by a good cover letter if you are very deliberate about doing something meaningful that will generate novel insight and not just be a permutation of similar papers of which there's 50 already in the literature. Right from the get-go, in the way that you plan your study, that you identify the most meaningful questions that you can answer with your skill sets and resources, and then become and stay conscientious for these issues in every step of the way.
I would like to just sort of build on this idea about telling the story and give some suggestions to the students on how to go about identifying that story if it isn't immediately clear. What I always ask my students to do is to answer 3 questions. The first question is, what did you do? The second question is, what is new? And the third question is, why is it significant? And I think where many people make mistakes in answering these questions is in the first one, which is in what did you do? Oftentimes, people will say, I synthesized this molecule, I characterized it by NMR, by IR, by TGA, DSC, and then I applied it in something like that. That is routine science. That is what we see the overwhelming majority of manuscripts coming in and being submitted, sort of follow that structure. But you keep hearing these comments about asking good questions and trying to address good questions. A better way of thinking about what did you do is to think about what is the scientific question or scientific hypothesis that you're testing, and to frame your story around that hypothesis. Or if you're doing methods development, what is that method that you are developing? Or if there was some sort of quantitative metric that was essential or that was really cool about your work, that's something to say that you did, that you made this impressive measurement. And to build the story around that, that is a much more exciting way of presenting the results and to share that knowledge. And from that, it becomes much easier to answer the what is new and why it's significant.
So, yeah, please.
Another point I want to add is just read the scope of the journal.
Very important.
That is a one thing. So first thing that you read that whether your paper is getting fit or not. So for sometimes students are very excited that we want to send it in a high impact fact journal, but sometimes it doesn't fit the scope. So that is also a fair key role.
So my next question is for Professor Sievers. What do you think are the major concerns or the major red flags that you see when an early career researcher submit their manuscript as as an independent researcher, they submit their first manuscripts? Are there any concerns or that you would like to address or would like to provide your point of view on?
It's a good question. I don't have any particular concerns about early career researchers publishing their own manuscripts. Of course, somebody who's in the early stages of independence is usually in an environment where they don't have all the resources available that they would like to have. And it becomes easier with time, with more resources that you manage to accrue as you have funding and new projects coming into your group, as you build your network where you can ask people for favors. So I guess the advice that I can build out of that is think even harder in how you can ask the meaningful questions that have not been asked. And I'll give an example for some papers that my group has published. Like we recently had a paper on mechanochemical plastics conversion that I will be talking about tomorrow. And we started thinking about to what extent some of these reactions are thermodynamically limited. The execution of the study was quite easy. We ran some calculations as to what the equilibrium constants are and how they depend on the conditions that we might have at impact sites in a ball mill. And then we wrote a meaningful discussion about it. If we knew exactly what the outcome would have been or what the direction was, something a student could have done in a week or two. But it was a meaningful question that had not been asked, and thus it really contributed to the discussion in literature. So if you are young and if you are somewhat constrained by where your lab is and how much you have been able to build up to this point, find those niches where you can add something meaningful, and then it doesn't have to be a study for which you need 5 multi-million-dollar instruments.
Thank you.
I would like to ask, am I audible?
Yeah.
Okay. So I would like to, am I audible now?
Yeah. So I would like to ask about the pre-screening channels. So what does our manuscript go through before even reaching the editor? And since we live in the world of AI now, so how is AI sorting also progressing? And what we can do to our manuscript so that it can make it through those channels and reach the editor?
Yeah, Dr. Shreya.
So, manuscript before it reaches the editors. So we have the editorial office people who actually sends it to the specific editor based on the topic of the submission. So this is with respect to Joule, it actually gets automatically, the system assigns it to the EIC, and based on the experience of the other editors, it gets assigned to the concerned other editors in the team. And what usually happens is we try to first, as we all had so much of discussion about the cover letter. So yes, cover letter we go through, and then we see about the what is the topic and what is the like, no, I wouldn't say always it's novelty, but what is the application and how is the paper has been structured, how is the figures. So all these things come into picture, and then there's a discussion amongst the entire editorial team, and it is then that it is decided whether it goes for a transfer or it goes for a external review. But one point I just wanted to focus is, in recent submissions we have seen that in the cover letter we always like 80% times we see that the authors did not even change the previous journal it has been submitted to. Even though it is not, I would say it is a red flag, but it's not always that we go by that. We understand that due to lack of time it might happen, but it's always advised to be a little bit careful whenever you're submitting to whichever journal it is, to follow the guidelines as well as the protocols. So, and also to highlight the importance of the work, rather than, many a times it's just a same abstract which is being copied in the cover letter. So that's how we work. But yes, there are several other journals in SEL Press whose workflow is very different from ours. But the initial screening is done based on the topic of which is discussed in the manuscript.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shreya. So a very nice point that has been raised. While your manuscript is rejected from one journal, before submitting to the next journal, read the cover letter very carefully. So before we open the session to the audience for the question and answers, one last question, which is a follow-up on the same thing to Professor Sara's, which is like, how does the journal deal with plagiarism or duplicate submissions, and how can authors comply with those ethical standards?
Yeah, so it is unethical to have your manuscript submitted to multiple journals at the same time. You are asked by all publishers, because we all follow the COPE ethical guidelines, to indicate that it is a unique submission that is not currently in review at another journal. Now, different publishers have different ways of handling plagiarism, but at ACS Publications, any manuscript that is at the point at which it would likely be accepted by a journal for publication, it will be scanned by a authenticate software for duplication and to identify whether or not there are duplicated texts with published manuscripts. This does not take into consideration the references, because that's obviously going to be an overlap. And we're not as so concerned about the experimental section, because the experimental section, there's only so many ways to write an experimental section, and we want you to write it in the very best way that you could reproduce your results, rather than change it from an excellent way in a previous manuscript. But you should always cite where you have been taking those methods from. So if you used a synthesis that was previously reported, that should be cited in your experimental section. But there's a threshold that is identified, that is set by the journal. And if the threshold is exceeded in terms of duplicated text, then it requires that an associate editor look at that duplicated text and make a decision as to if it's significant or not. Most of the time, it requires a little bit of revision from the authors to reword some points. And this is where I always tell people, don't cut and paste from other papers. Write from scratch, write your own original ideas, and this will not be an issue. But you can sometimes see where people have cut and paste a sentence from one paper to another and then changed a word or two. That's still plagiarism because the idea is from somebody else. But if the duplication is substantially high, it can result in your paper being rejected.
I can just build on your first comment with duplicate submissions. So oftentimes we catch those. If it's within the same publishing house, there are software tools that catch them. More often than not, we have very good software to find the most suitable reviewers. And there's a chance that I will invite the same reviewer as a journal from ACS or RSC. And in which case, in every instance that it has happened to me, I will have an email communication with the other editor, and we decide to reject it in both journals, no matter where it is in the peer review process at that moment, just to make a case.
So much for your valuable inputs. We now open the floor to the audience for their questions. So if you have any question, please raise your hand. Yeah, we have one here. Can we get a mic, please?
Yeah.
Hi, my question is about peer review. So when we write in a cover letter, the reviewers suggested and also opposed. How often is it followed that these suggestions are followed? And the second question to add on to this is, how do I sign up to contribute as a reviewer that I'm available for if some paper needs reviewing, and then I can contribute as a peer reviewer?
At ACS publications, we won't use opposed reviewers, but the selection of which reviewers is at the discretion of the associate editor. And I would say we like good suggestions. We don't like it when you pick your buddies and your friends. So we're happy to use them, but if it's somebody who's just down the road from you, chances are we won't select that person. And I forget what the other part of the question was.
The question was, how do I sign up to contribute as a peer reviewer that I'm available for it?
Oh, and we have the ACS Reviewer Lab that I'd encourage you to sign up for.
So yeah, in RSC, the general advice is, it's informal, is to first look at the probable reviewers, and then if you find one of the reviewers is also suggested by the author, so there is nothing wrong in going. So it is normally never 100% of your suggestions. Okay, so generally, if you suggest a very good reviewer, and then there is also a way to check the track record of the reviewers. I mean, like how many times they have reviewed, whether they came back very quickly or not. So there are a lot of parameters. So associate editor normally looks at it, and if the suggestion is very good, and if you do not have collaborations or is not your neighbor. So if it is a good suggestion, so normally they go. Maybe one of your reviewers could be the suggestion from you. And sometime it is not allowed. For example, if you have conflicting reports, and we normally editor is not allowed to pick one of your suggestions to have adjudicative referee report. So that is not generally allowed. So regarding the RSC, I think you can basically, once you have your account, so normally you can be called for reviewing, and also it will work if you write to the associate editor in your area saying that you are interested in. If you already have the, if you have already, you can go to the website and register as a reviewer. So you can also write to the editors, and then they may also call you up for the review.
As far as in Thieme concerned, you can write to editorial office. We will put you to the editorial pool. We have something we call as a crowd review system, where we have a very good review system, which are fast and very authentic one, like a traditional peer review, but it's somewhat different. So you can join that. And as Sir was saying, you can write to associate editor to get into the pool. But normally, journals prefer somebody who has some experience, like postdoc or postdoc with some experience to have in the editorial pool. And second thing is, as you were saying, peer review kind of thing. In Thema, if we do not send to the opposing reviewers, that's a policy. So that if you are having a reviewer, you have said that you don't want your manuscript to go to that person, we don't send. Otherwise, it is like a one overlapping one. We can send it to it. Otherwise, it will be the discretion of the associate editor to send which one.
At SEL Press, if you are interested in reviewing a manuscript, so you can obviously write to the editors or the editor-in-chief in whichever journal you are interested. But obviously, it depends on your experience as a researcher that if you that whether you will be added to the reviewer pool or not. Related to selection of reviewers, so it is predominantly done based on the expertise of the reviewer based on the manuscript, obviously. And related to suggested reviewers, it is we always cross-check, even if it is one that, one person who is a well-known researcher in the field, we have to cross-check the whether they have any ongoing collaboration, or even if he or she was a PhD supervisor or any kind of work-related association is there, then we intend not to select that reviewer. And obviously, we have a policy that opposing reviewers, we never send it out.
So Elsevier also has an online database of interested reviewers, we call it. And then the one thought that has not been mentioned to get involved into peer review, talk to your advisor and other busy collaborators you have, because every journal is happy if a well-established reviewer who has to decline to review a manuscript puts forth a couple of names of maybe more junior people who are highly qualified for that particular topic who could review it instead. And I use those names fairly often if I can't get the person that I originally invited, but that person vouches for somebody else. That's the best lead I have as an editor.
Just to add, so when you write, for example, to the associate editor that you are interested as a reviewer, so it is always better to write if that associate editor is in your field, and maybe the associate editor knows your supervisor. For example, if you are a postdoc, I think it's better to request after you are into your postdoc and gain some experience. And then if your professor knows the associate, normally, they can assess the level of your expertise normally. So that works generally well, I think. Yeah, thank you.
The last point, yeah.
Mike.
Please
You're not
hold the
audible.
mic.
It's on. All of you have talked about storytelling and making the figures good and nice. So I feel we are not trained as scientists to do this. So I have not realized this till I was past my PhD, that not only the content of the paper, but how we present it is also important. So it took me some time to understand this. And it was also on the back of my postdoc advisor who used to push me. And then I also felt that it's also an art. So it's not science. So I think that is fundamental, I think, for all of us to realize that at least that art and science are together here. So what is your perspective on having some kind of sessions on, let's say, data visualization and storytelling? Because we are not trained on these things.
So ACS Publications has quite a number of tutorials and also online resources to help scientists learn how to craft a title, how to write an abstract, how to present your data in graphical form so that it is quite clear. And I'm guessing that many of the other publishers and societies have similar resources. And so I want to just encourage people to take advantage of those because we've spent a lot of time and energy to generate these things. And we want people to be able to present their work in the very best form.
Yeah, so yes, see, the artwork is very important in the early stage, but eventually when it goes to the reviewer, so they will look at all the details. It's not, don't get it wrong, but it is very important. Even if it is published after publication, if the artwork is good, if the readers are able to, clearly understand it. I mean, generally, if somebody reads the abstract and then goes through all the figures and conclusion, they should get the major theme. Okay, then they will decide whether they want to go into detail. So it always helps. I think every publisher, RSC also has, I think, a lot of material. There are also dedicated sessions. Even SERB and DSC also, I think, sometimes try to do this. So there is enough material, I think, if you want to go through.
Just one quick thing is that while there's some art to it, think about your science. You're trying to be very precise in your scientific design and your measurements and everything. You're trying to do the same thing with your writing.
Another good rule of thumb is to think about it from a perspective of a reader. Would you like to read it? Would you find this figure insightful? I'm over 40 years of age, so the question, are the labels readable, is becoming increasingly relevant. And if you embrace this perspective and maybe even give it to your lab mate or somebody who's 1 degree removed from your work and see how does this work for you as a reader. And if the person is struggling with anything, others will too, and you can improve.
As far as artwork goes so just think about a panel with 18 figures and panel with 6 figures. So it makes a lot of difference in readability of the manuscript. Recently, I remember there was one manuscript in the science which only have a figures. So it has 9 panels of 18 figure each in the story. So there was really big uproar in the community, like how one can read and interpret the results. So that is a thing. As far as a concern about learning, I come from a school of training where they say that in PhD you learn everything. So there are a lot of material. So I learned figure making from Professor Kamat's website and his editorials. So his website, he has a very good tutorials on how to make a good graphs. So there are many people in a community who are doing a lot of stuff that you can learn from that. And also, when I take editorial talks, I said there is one very good course, Stanford Scientific Writing course on Coursera, which is free. And it helped a lot of students in India. We are coming from a country where the English is a second language. So it become very journalized. Like when we try to write a very complex English in our manuscripts. You need to write a very simple English and how to craft a storytelling. It is a very good course, free course to do. Everybody, I recommend to it, everybody to do it.
Thank you for these insightful thoughts. And just want to add one very quick point is that there are several desktop seminars on how to publish your manuscript as well that you can definitely go online. RSC has several of those. So you can attend any one of those and get insights on how to package the story. Major points, I think all points are here. And when it was said that we should always share it with our peers or some, so I would just suggest you whenever you are suggesting, or you're referring your friend that, please read my manuscript, don't give it to a always yes friend that yes, it is correct. Yes, it is correct. Give it to a friend who's critical about, who comes and says, no, this doesn't really look nice. I am not able to understand this figure at all. So I think we need one critical friend and that saves a lot of reviewers' comments.
Yeah, and it's easy to blame the reader for being ignorant, but the one thing that you control in this process is how you explain it. And the reader will be as ignorant as they are.
Yes. So anybody else? Oh, yes. Yeah, here.
Hi, I have a question that can you share your perspective and insight about the challenges and the advantages of double-blinded review, peer review systems?
Double-blinded peer review systems.
It has a double-blinded always advantage, like the biasness removes from the system. So in our case, we know that if somebody knows, like if I'm an editor, I may met you somewhere in some conference, or you were in my institute, or I follow your work. So I could have a biasness for your work also. So to remove that biasness, the double-blinded system works very perfectly. The challenge again is, I say, when we are doing the peer review, sometimes uh, challenge comes like person can be biased. Like sometimes people make a notion on a writing styles also. There are people who make a notions writing style. This manuscript is coming maybe from this region of the world. So there are like particular phrases, and there are something particular writing style also. So that again makes a difficult thing for a peer reviewing type. That's my experience, what I have seen in last 5 years in my group.
Usually papers also have too many self-citations to be really double-blind at the end of the day anyway.
It's also really difficult to accurately capture the prior results or prior work and how it fits in without disclosing who the authors likely are. So there are quite a number of challenges associated with it, even though in concept, I think many of us think it seems like a way to minimize bias, but oftentimes it's inevitable that people will be able to figure these things out.
So I would actually comment as a reviewer. I reviewed certain articles where it was double-blinded, but I could easily make out. I mean, like it really doesn't work. It's good, but on the other side, I would also like to tell you that in RSC, we wanted to, when in the editorial board meetings, we look at how the rejections are and which country is doing the citations. A lot of data we look at. So I wanted the certain data, and I wanted to see the papers of one country and how these are rejected, okay, by the community normally. So we looked at that some papers from some countries are rejected more than the other countries. Okay, but then the other side is for that country, the citations were more compared to the average. I don't know whether people rejected more from that country, but if you look at the citation contribution, there is a more citation contribution from that country. I don't know whether it was good that they rejected more papers, and maybe they should reject more papers from other countries as well. So, I mean, but double blind, if it works very well, if you figure out how to make it work, maybe it will be good. But I don't know how to make it work.
Yeah. So one of the key challenge that I feel in this publication thing is the bias. I think if you don't know the editor, if you don't know the reviewer, you have a good work, it's difficult to publish. And we see many people who are well connected to the editors and the reviewers. They have an easy way to publish in big journals. And when you read these papers, we several times ask this question, how come this guy published in this journal? When several of ours just get rejected at the desk. So what is your thought about this? The biases by the editors and biases by the reviewers?
I think we all have to confront that there is different types of biases in the peer review process. I think none of us would say that there isn't, and that it does come up. And I also think that there can be biases in that scientists don't know or understand what is the nature of significant scientific research in particular regions of the world compared to other regions of the world. And that can also play into the perceptions that people have. I think one of the key things that we can do to address this kind of bias is to make sure that we have diverse editorial teams. And I think if you start to look across all the different publishers, there's been great efforts over the past decade to diversify the teams and get greater geographical diversity so that those editors can help inform the broader editorial team, the editors-in-chief, about these types of biases and how we can try to minimize them. And it's also why I think many of us editors like to travel so that we can meet people and understand these things ourselves.
Obviously, we agree that, there may be biasness from editors or reviewers. But one thing at SEL Press is there from the editorial side. If obviously we commission articles after we meet people at conferences or at workshops, but if we have if we know them potentially, like I have been working in the same group, or I know that researcher quite well, when we receive a submission from their end, we are actually blinded from the manuscript. Say, if I know a person too well, or he is from the same institute as where I have worked on, I will be blinded from that manuscript from the day one of submission of that manuscript. But yes, it also depends on the editor, that the editor will have to come up and say that, I know this person, so I would like to be blinded. So whatever is the decision with respect to that manuscript, that particular editor would not be aware of it.
So yeah, I agree, Vivek, that it happens. And but I think this is where the AI and more data analytics within the Scholar One, for example, where RSC uses. I think because after publication, if you also track how it does, and maybe each associate editor also should be kind of scored. And maybe this is a very complex. How do you figure it out, right? There is a problem. So I think this is where a lot of research has to go in. I think some kind of, even citations, right? There is also a lot of bias, right? I mean, like if you publish, maybe if you're an early career, maybe your paper will not be published, cited so much, but if the same paper comes from a very well-known group, maybe citations will be more. So there are a lot of issues even to figure out what is a quality, even after publication. So it's a lot of issues are there. But I think this is where maybe more analytics into the software, the handling, these platforms will be good.
Maybe a good collaboration between AI and human will be an answer to this.
Yes, maybe there is opportunity for a big startup and maybe many startups. I think there should be research. Just because you are able to do something, you should not go and plug in. I think this can lead to more complex problems. So this should be thoroughly studied and then see what are the implications. Whether you may be getting some meaningful data when you implement it, but whether that has any other implications. Because if you are implementing something which is new, it may seem that it is working, but it may lead to more complex issues. So it has to be thoroughly evaluated.
Yeah, I think it's really important to realize that publishing has become a really data-oriented process where editors-in-chief will receive all sorts of information about what percentage of papers are coming, numbers are coming from a particular country, the acceptance rate. We can filter that by different associate editors, figure out what each editor's impact factor is, and we will start to analyze all of these things to try to identify if there are corrections or discussions that need to be had. And so all of this data is very helpful, and that's part of what we're all doing.
Although one of the inconvenient truths in publishing is something that's scientifically referred to as Goodhart's principle, which is as soon as a metric becomes the target, the metric ceases to be meaningful. And so with all the discussion that we have here about data, it's manipulated. There are citation networks of scientists who cite each other to drive up each other's H indices and citation scores, and some governments quite explicitly reward their scientists for doing exactly that. That's not the reason why we start tracking citations. So,
we have to, that's where I said that first we have to evaluate whether the system that we develop is really contributing, or then it is having more other byproducts. So this is where I think we have to first do proper analysis of it. Our main idea is not just to publish, as in the previous discussion was also raised. So idea is to make some impact through discoveries. Whether we are able to reach that or not, how do you even quantify that is a very big, and time scales are very long. But this is where I think more advanced tools and analysis might help. Otherwise, maybe it's just leave it as such.
Ethics also. Like when we talk about biasness, it's about our ethics, how the editorial office and other people are upholding the ethics of publishing. We could make out biasness clearly with Scholar1 data. We can know that from where we are sending the manuscripts to the reviewer, there can be a particular region of the reviewers who are rejecting a manuscript from a particular region. So it's just about how good your editorial office in catching that biasness from the data and then taking a measures and steps to correct it. Like biasness is going to be always there. Even if we say the AI till now it's as good as my training models are. So we have seen that if my training models are biased, I will get the bias outputs. So that is the main challenge till now.
Yeah. Hello. Hello, everyone. So, yeah, thank you very much for the nice discussion. And you have very well actually presented what the publication house actually wants and what are the editor actually look for the, kind of the manuscript. So, and you have very well taken the questions up from the audience. So actually some requirement actually the authors also want actually from the editors and the publication house. Something like that actually. There are actually some time actually, not all the time, some points are actually missed from the editor side and the publication house side. That must be actually taken care of. For example, actually, if the manuscript actually goes under peer review system, and sometime reviewer actually they are in so hurry, they made many comments, right? And on the basis of those comments, editor take a decision, actually the manuscript is actually rejected. And when the author actually, the serious guy, go through the reviewers comments very seriously and point out actually, okay, the reviewer asked these points, and most of the points are there in the within the manuscript, right? So what I have seen actually, the ACS have very good system, like the authors can easily go for appealing. Actually, if they appeal, they very well taken by the editor. If they have the proper explanation, then they reconsider the manuscript, give the due weightage if those things are there. But that time actually it was actually missed from the editor side also. And sometime actually the reviewers are not so serious to give the kind of the biased comment. If I am talking about the Elsevier actually have the support customer support system, but that is not effective actually. If you write something, right, the mail goes to the customer care support, and generally they write, our editor's decision is final, we can't do anything. For example, generally Elsevier send their manuscript for 4-5 reviewers, and among them 3 reviewers give like minor revision, one give moderate, one gives like major, and that major is not a major, that's a minor, right? So the editor on the basis of this give the rejection, right? The author may get some time disturbed for that. So the appealing system should be, to be strong for all the publication house. The editor along with the reviewer should be responsible. Actually, they should actually read at least the reviewer's report, and as well as for the author's manuscript properly to address the kind of the
So is it about the betterment of the appealing system?
exactly.
What is?
Once the manuscript is rejected based on several reviewer comments, some are minor, some are major, and the editor. A robust appeal.
So we generally accept resubmitted manuscripts that have been previously rejected. Now, it's important that you take the reviews seriously. Now, just appealing and resubmitting the same thing without addressing any of the issues will get you rejected again very quickly. But if you do write a detailed and credible point-to-point list of answers to the reviewer comments, we're open-minded. It should not be a straightforward rebuttal and saying that this is all wrong, because, well, we did make up our mind, and based on the reviews, there are issues. I mean, yes, of course, there are reviewers who can be wrong, who can be conscrewing things that are already there. But in that case, I would also ask you, did you make it clear enough? It might be your writing style. And so in the very unlikely scenario that one or more reviewers were biased because of personal interactions or because of strategic interests in getting their paper published before you can get yours out, those cases can be made. But it should have substance. If I feel that somebody just writes that because it's convenient and they're not willing to work with the reviews, then that's usually not particularly convincing.
So one thing I think is worth pointing out is that most of the time editors have the ability to go against what appears as the recommendation of the reviewers. Because one of the roles of an editor is to calibrate those reviews to the journal's standards. So that can be where somebody has said to reject because they think it's not significant enough or in scope for the journal, but they disagree and will actually accept the manuscript. On the other hand, it may say that they're minor revisions, but then when you start to read them, they're actually quite critical, or they're pointing out something that's significant that can lead to a rejection. And then I think this other point, it's very easy for people to dismiss the comments from reviewers when they say, but that was in my paper. But really what that is a sign is that at least the way that I would encourage people to take that is it wasn't clearly conveyed to that reviewer. That may not be the case. Maybe they were too fast and everything, but just take it as that wasn't clearly conveyed and revise to address that point and make it clearer. That will always get you further down the line and through the process than just saying, well, I said that and I'm going to just resubmit it as is.
Yeah, just one more point I would like to add here. So normally if one or two reviewers strongly suggest it, and then one reviewer says that the novelty is a problem because there are many other studies. If that reviewer, although has not given everything in detail, but just made sure that, it is very clear that there is a lot of literature around it and it is also in the similar line. So maybe editor might just go with that as well sometime. But as she said, if the reviewer is not able to clearly get everything, then this may happen, what you are suggesting. Yeah, thank you.
I like to add editorial office perspective on this. Most of the editorial offices, irrespective of the publisher, have a very robust appeal management systems. I have myself experience with Elsevier, where my paper is rejected after minor revision, and I went for an appeal, and they accepted that there is a mistake. They should be sending me the acceptance mail. By mistake, they sent me the rejection mail. So it comes out. So sometimes there can be experience because of volume in the journal. There are journals which are very high volume journals, which are like having 100 to 200 papers a day kind of journals also, when a bigger publishers. So there can be a one outlier case in that. But most of the time when there is appeal, I can tell you my experience, we thoroughly again go to all the reviewers comment, then editor-in-chief again go, we take discussions, and then it goes back whether the appeal is successful or not. Thank you.
For us, the appeal is like we always prefer a strong point-to-point response is made against the reviewer's comments. And then, you submit a rebuttal based on the editor decision rather than directly submitting unsolicited rebuttal. So after we receive a PBP, it's always a discussion within the editorial team where the EIC is also a part of the discussion, and then we invite for the rebuttal. And like we have been receiving most of the times rebuttals which were not like discussed previously, and it's not clear in the rebuttals like what are the changes that has been done or whether the points have been clarified, whatever was raised by the reviewers. So it's really important to highlight that I agree that sometimes a reviewer in a hurry might miss certain things, but it's very important to clarify or highlight the changes that you have done or where the mistake has happened, and we take a deeper look into it and then only decide whether it is worth to consider the appeal.
Yes, since we have peer review point, so I would like to ask, is it not only about the decision and also about the time duration it takes for the peer review? So since we are working in a field which is ever evolving, I have submitted my manuscript, and when it is in the peer review process, it is taking time. We know it can take up to a year as well in some cases. So what if someone else publishes a similar study in between, and how favorably the editorial offices look at this matter?
So typically we do understand that there are certain delays that happens from the reviewer side. So it is actually the editorial office or the editor's responsibility that we try to follow up and fasten the reviewing process. But again, I wouldn't say that at SEL Press it might take up to a year time, maximum of 3 months, I would say. But in that, if something similar comes up, we always intend to check the similarity of the results, as well as we try to find out how significantly different is the presently submitted work as compared to the just published work. So, and only on that we decide that whether it can be published or not. And yes, of course, reviewers' comments play an important role, and followed by the editor's take on it.
In our case, we make paper go ahead because when you have submitted, you have not done that. Some similar kind of paper is under review. So that is the first thing is like another thing is sometimes there can be, if there is a significant clash, kind of discovery kind of clash, then the priority date of submission comes into the system. So if both the publisher using Scholar One, so we can, with the Scholar One help, we can know which manuscript is submitted earlier. So the priority of that goes to that. So that is what makes important. But that is only happen when there is a commercial interest comes after the publication or some patent, something comes, and they want to establish the priority on the things. But normally, if it's you are publishing and supposedly your paper comes a week after a paper which has been published. So as a peer reviewer, I also don't know. Editor, I don't know. I will be only knowing when I just going to make the manuscript live on other databases. Then I can come to across to know that this something similar is published.
I can comment on an example that was in the ACS publications. There was a time where 3 different groups were all submitted within 2 days of each other, a paper reporting ultra-thin gold nanowires. And two of the different groups knew of their submissions, and they timed their submissions together and notified the editorial team in their cover letters about it, submitting to the same journal. But then there was this third one that came in. They all somehow submitted to the same journal. And so basically the editor managed all 3 papers. They all got high reviews, and they published them all at the same time. So sometimes people can actually work together. But also reviewers sometimes catch these things because they're getting asked to review things. And it can be helpful to comment on that because I also know of situations where because of competing papers that were submitted that were revealed by reviewers to editors, that a recommendation for collaboration and coordination has been made. So there are some ways to address these types of things. They're not that common, though, as much as I think we hear these myths or these stories.
Yeah, so in RSC, I have seen that, normally the timeline is 1 to 1.5 hours is very typical, but some articles go very long, and I myself have experienced. So typically, if I go back and see why these are not getting reviews very quickly, most of the reviewers reject because they don't have expertise. So this means either you have submitted to a wrong journal, maybe, or your work is completely outside the typical area. Most of the time editors also like to publish it, but sometimes you don't find an expert who has expertise on both, maybe a couple of different areas. In that case, it becomes extremely difficult to find the reviewer, and most of them keep basically rejecting, and you have like 30 people and all of them have rejected. Nobody is able to basically assess the paper fully. But these are very small number, which goes beyond 2 to 3 months, is I think maybe less than 5% or even maybe small. So, but this is where, I think if you communicate it to your community journal, so rather than to something else, I think then reviewers should come back very fast.
Yeah.
So here, what I'm going to ask is something out of academia. So the thing is, ultimately data speaks. So often there are some people who is from industries or individually. For example, in my case, after completing my PhD, I started my own laboratory, and I started out of curiosity. I've been discovering a lot of things, and after that, I converted that into a company. In that company, also some major scientists are working on different technologies, which we like to publish the paper. But how journals are taking the publications or submissions from industries or any individuals? For example, Einstein published this 4 of his breakthrough papers when he was working as a patent, say a clerk as a patent office, right? So those days it was possible. But nowadays it seems how the publications are seeing such individuals or industries papers when they are submitting it.
Yeah, but I don't see that anyone differentiates it, but I will leave it to others to comment. I don't think anybody differentiates. We look at only whether it is done properly.
Because while submitting, it's asking for some credibility things. So, yeah.
There are journal like ACS, that process chemistry journal, that ACS. They are mainly the industry people publish, because they are publishing the process chemistry, which if they try to publish in like a normal organic chemistry journal, people will reject that, saying there is no novelty. It's a process chemistry paper. So there is no, like last week, I accepted one of the papers, which is coming from pharma company from Japan. So there is nothing like that. There is no biasness. As far as the data concerned, all of the publishers now have a very robust data checking mechanisms. So faking the data or manipulating data becomes increasingly difficult and very sophisticated ones. That is.
So what about individuals, like someone who...
You can individually publish, no problem. If you have a data, if you have a good science to back your story.
Yeah, how the publications is seeing that individual papers?
No difference. No biasness, nothing. We treat it like a normal.
Actually, I would like to second that. And in Applied Catalysis A, we actually proactively reach out to industry even for perspectives now, because in an attempt to bridge this gap between academic research, which frankly sometimes happens in an ivory tower, and it's academically rigorous, but not quite clear how it will translate to do anything meaningful in the world. and industrial needs for understanding, we are working with people in industry who are willing to write a perspective as to how their part of catalysis research would be more meaningful if addressing the following questions or something like that. And I think that's an important contribution. That kind of perspective doesn't even need new data, but we want to give a stage to people in industry to voice what needs are for work that is still fundamental research, but addresses areas where lack of knowledge is impeding progress.
One question, one important question.
Moderators and panelists to wrap it up.
In the interest of time, I think the panelists are here around.
I think it's a very important questions because related to patent.
But
so that's why.
We still have tea break, don't worry.
Yeah. Okay.
For a long time, the question should be brief.
Brief question.
Oh, we had one student raising. Oh, yeah, please. A very quick question. A very quick question.
Just before the panel.
Yeah, can somebody hand over the mic?
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, I don't know who is asking.
Okay. Yeah. Can you please pass over the mic to?
Let him ask.
Oh, okay.
He's been raising hand for a long time.
I got somebody in the back.
Being a student from a college, I have a query regarding while evaluating the manuscript, can you consider the reputation of the research institute or credential of the research gate? To what extent it will influence the decision making?
Then brief answers. Brief questions.
So basically, when we are considering a manuscript, it's all about a science. It's not about a reputation of a group or institute. So nothing like that has come to our way. So if you have written a manuscript reasonably well, it has a good content, it's normally passed to the reviewers or associate editors to pass on to the reviewers. There is no biasness on the content or like on a reputation of the group or institute from where it is coming.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. So
we'll take the next question.
The very last question,
You,
sir.
Yeah. That is.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'd like to bring back the discussion a little bit to the packaging of the paper again, because recently, specifically in heterogeneous catalysis, it's happening that if you want to go a level higher to the high impact journals, you need to have a particular template. You need to have your catalyst characterized, and then you need to have the results. And in the end, you have to append it with the DFT data, irrespective of the fact that it doesn't change the conclusion of the paper. And it's becoming like a death cycle for people. If you want to go from catalysis journal to, let's say, Angwantic Chemistry, Nature Communication, you need that. Is this something that editors at their own meeting are discussing, or is there something we can do about it to get out of this? Because one problem is it's much easier for larger groups who have both experimentalists and DFT people working for them to generate such kind of papers. But for earlier career researcher, it becomes a lot harder because we have to find relevant collaborators who are willing to work with us, and it's not always easy. So how can we overcome this challenge?
I would say we have to keep trying, and we have to submit quality work to journals without DFT calculations, because frankly, in the majority of cases where I see this, you called it an amendment or something like that, it is nothing more than that. And I fail to see how it really adds substantial value to it. Now, that being said, there are elegant studies that combine both, and they become more impactful because of that combination. But yes, it has become a disease that this is expected. And I even heard that there are DFT mills where for a fee, somebody will generate DFT figures that you can add to your manuscript, whether the calculations have been performed properly or not. And that, of course, is highly unethical.
This change basically arises from community. So I give you an example, like earlier, when we are characterizing organic compounds, IR data is enough. Now everybody is giving XPS data. So this is change come from community, and it has to be controlled from the community. So I say that DFT, most of the time, DFT is just a padding good figures to the paper so that paper look beautiful. So this is like, again, I have
DFT guys.
these machines. I have seen these
Okay.
paper mills, what is we call DFT mills.
So,
It comes.
I would like to, there are enough DFT people here.
No, it's just, no, I'm not again any computational, but this is what the people like, again, why these DFT mills come up. So that some figures are generated and put it up. So this is a community which raises the ask. So has to be controlled inside when we are discussing as a reviewer. If somebody adding that DFT, you as a reviewer can ask question whether it is making a complete story or having any impact on the story or not. So when you ask that this study you have presented in the paper, which is I feel is not necessary, your other results beautifully collaborated what you are trying to tell. So the trend start coming back.
Yeah. I think this is an
but I mean, there's also this like belief that any outcome of DFT must be more true than an experimental study, and I mean that's of course not the case. And I can use DFT to give you any answer you want because I set up a model that is very close to the answer that I want, and then I don't allow it to converge very much, and the outcome will be exactly what I want. So when you see, I mean, okay, don't get me wrong, DFT has made great contributions, but a good DFT study is casting a wide net and is allowing the models to converge to a global maximum or minimum if you talk about energy, and is allowing for the exercise to have multiple possible outcomes and not just one preconceived notion. And if that's done well, so no offense to anybody here, then DFT is great. But the notion that we can just add something at that level to our study is something that we should fight back. And if some reviewer is asking for it in my journal and the authors come back and say, look, I failed to see the point, I can assign my infrared spectra based on 50 years of good precedents in literature. Why do I need to model this? Good point.
So with that, we come to the end of our panel discussion. And I think the takeaway message that we can take from here is like, publish your research, because something that is unknown to the world on a Tuesday morning will become known to the whole world maybe on a Wednesday afternoon. So, and then a good story with a bad packaging and a bad story with a good packaging won't work. The story needs to be good, the packaging needs to be good. And there's still some challenges that we are in the process of overcoming, and hopefully we'll have more answers to it when we'll have our next panel discussion in a next conference. So with that, I thank all of our panelists for taking out the time and discussing, putting forward your insights onto the table to our audience, and also our audience for engaging with the panelists and asking so many questions. So thank you all.
I would also like to thank all the panelists and our moderators for an exciting session. Students can find the panelists or the moderators during the tea break. And I request you to assemble back at the respective venues by 11:45 sharp. We'll start all the sessions in time. Hey, great. Hey, you guys now know around.
Ma'am, do not good thing.
Right. Hey, this one? Yeah. This one.
Mic आपका?
मैंने अंदर है.